Art Carney and Joyce Randolph lit up television screens in the 1950s as Ed and Trixie Norton, the lovable neighbors on The Honeymooners. Their on-screen chemistry was so effortless that millions assumed the bond must have extended off-camera as well. But when the series ended, something unusual happened. They never spoke again. No calls, no reunions, nothing. It might seem like two coworkers simply drifting apart after a job, but the truth was more complicated and far more emotional than anyone realized. What really happened between them remained a quiet mystery for decades, and the answer challenges what fans thought they knew about America's favorite neighbors, on-screen. Carney and Randolph were pure magic, bringing humor, warmth, and heart into American living rooms week after week. Their dynamic felt so authentic that many believed they had to be close in real life. But behind the scenes, the situation was very different. While Jackie Gleason and Audrey Meadows sometimes clashed or joked around between takes, Carney and Randolph kept their interactions strictly professional. They weren't hostile, just distant. They showed up, did their jobs, and went home. No shared dinners, no backstage conversations. No relationships that extended past the studio doors. Joyce later described Carney as kind and talented, but extremely private. Someone who didn't open up or socialize outside of work, yet viewers at home never saw that. The illusion of closeness was so strong that fans assumed the two remained lifelong friends. In reality, their working relationship ended the moment the honeymooners wrapped, leaving people to wonder why they never became friends in the first place. To understand that, you have to look at who Art Carney was once the cameras stopped rolling. On-screen, he was lovable and goofy, the ideal neighbor. Off-screen, he carried deep private wounds. Before becoming a star, Carney served in the U.S. Army during World War II and was wounded in the leg during the Battle of Normandy, leaving him with a lifelong limp. But the physical injury was only part of it. Friends and biographers later revealed that he suffered from what we now recognize as PTSD. Long before the condition was widely understood, he battled depression and anxiety, and he developed a drinking problem that haunted him for years. Despite the charm and comedic timing that made him a star, his private world was filled with shadows. Fame was something he never enjoyed. In fact, he often found it unbearable. Unlike Jackie Gleason, who thrived in the spotlight, Carney performed his scenes, did press only when required, and vanished as soon as filming wrapped. He rarely stayed to socialize on set and kept to himself during breaks, remaining a mystery to many of his colleagues, including Joyce. In interviews, he openly acknowledged that he had no interest in being part of the Hollywood scene, and he meant it. He avoided red carpets, skipped reunions, and declined numerous interview requests. Even after winning an Academy Award in the 1970s, a moment that could have transformed his public presence, he slipped away from the public. Again almost immediately. This deep need for privacy shaped every relationship he had. He wasn't rude or cold, just closed off, emotionally guarded in a way that left others puzzled. Joyce Randolph later said that, although he was respectful and easy to work with, he never opened up. There was no small talk, no shared confidences, no bond beyond the scenes they filmed together. Seeing this side of Art, Carney casts his silence in a different light. It wasn't about dislike or conflict. It was about retreat, a lifelong pattern of withdrawing from people and situations that made him feel vulnerable. Unfortunately, this meant that even his most iconic screen partner never truly knew the man behind the performance. For Joyce, the distance would never be fully explained, and her reflections reveal something even more personal. She spent decades answering questions about Art Carney. Fans always wanted to know whether he was as funny, warm, and charming off-camera as the Ed Norton they adored. Her answer remained the same. He was talented, professional, and intensely private. She acknowledged that his silence after the show ended surprised her. They had worked closely for years, and yet when filming wrapped, he simply disappeared. No calls, no messages, no reunions. At first she wondered if she was the only one excluded, but in time she realized he had withdrawn from everyone. Even Jackie Gleason, who had a long-running connection with Carney, rarely heard from him again. Audrey Meadows also commented on his absence. Carney skipped every reunion, tribute, and retrospective related to the honeymooners. He didn't offer public remarks or respond to invitations. It was as if he had chosen to put that entire chapter behind him. Joyce never speculated about his reasons. She never accused him of anything, and she remained unfailingly gracious. She praised his brilliance, described him as very quiet, and left it at that. Still, there was a faint sadness in her words, not anger, but a quiet disappointment, a recognition that the closeness so many believed in had never been real, and that perhaps a part of her wished it had been. Whatever kept Art Carney distant stayed with him long after the cameras stopped rolling. When Honeymooners ended its original run in the mid-1950s, each cast member stepped into a new chapter. Some soared to even greater fame, while others gradually drifted away from the spotlight. For Joyce Randolph and Art Carney, their post-Honeymooners lives moved in completely different directions. Joyce, who had charmed audiences as the sharp-witted Trixie, slowly retreated from television. She appeared in a handful of roles after the show ended, but she never pursued a high-profile acting career. She shifted her focus toward her personal life, settling into a quieter rhythm that included stage work and family. Joyce married marketing executive Richard Lincoln Charles and had a son. In the years that followed, she rarely sought the spotlight. But whenever she was asked to speak about the honeymooners, she always made time, answering with dignity, grace, and a touch of affectionate nostalgia. Art Carney, meanwhile, went in a direction that looked glamorous on the surface, but proved far more isolating. After the honeymooners, he took on a wide range of dramatic roles that surprised critics. For a man who had been celebrated for his comedic brilliance, he revealed an unexpected depth and vulnerability. In 1974, he stunned the entertainment world by winning the Academy Award for Best Actor for Harry and Tonto. A quiet, reflective film about an aging man traveling across the country, the role was introspective, melancholy, and full of subtle charm qualities that, in many ways, mirrored Carney himself. Yet even as his career reached new heights, he withdrew further from public life. He rarely gave interviews, declined most social appearances, and skipped nearly every major tribute, reunion, or retrospective tied to the honeymooners. While Joyce answered fan mail and shared fond memories, Carney retreated deeper into his own private world. Some people saw his absence as humility. Others believed it was exhaustion, fatigue of a man worn down by an industry he never fully trusted. Geography added to the distance. Joyce stayed firmly rooted in New York, the city she loved, and where the honeymooners had been filmed. Carney moved around and eventually settled into a quiet life far from the noise of Hollywood and Broadway. There were no joint appearances, no talk show reunions, not even a candid photo to suggest they had crossed paths again. As the years passed, Joyce was often asked whether she ever heard from Art. Her answer remained the same. No, not once. Not when the show was honored by the Television Academy, not when fans pleaded for a reunion. Whatever connection they had on screen disappeared the moment the production ended, and as both of their lives unfolded, it became clear that the silence between them wasn't accidental, was permanent. But what many people overlooked was that Joyce wasn't the only one Carney drifted away from. He had cut ties with almost everyone connected to the show. The reason why was far more complex than anyone realized. For years, fans assumed Joyce was the only castmate he lost touch with. But the truth was that Carney stepped back from nearly everyone, including those he had seemed closest to during filming. Jackie Gleason, the show's star and creator, remained a major force in entertainment for decades. Gleason and Carney had been a formidable pair, with brilliant chemistry and a natural rhythm that made their scenes unforgettable. Yet even that bond faded once the cameras shut off. Carney did not appear at most of Gleason's major career events, skipped televised tributes, and declined interviews about their time together. Audrey Meadows, who played Alice Cramden, also expressed confusion about Carney's absence. Like Joyce, she held warm memories of working with him, but admitted that once the show ended, he simply disappeared. No calls, no letters, no contact of any kind. It was as though he had closed the door on that part of his life and never once looked back at first. People assumed he was simply private, perhaps shy or introverted. But over time, it became clear that Carney's withdrawal went far beyond that. He didn't just step back from the public eye. He erased himself from the show's legacy entirely, When the Honeymooners was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame, he didn't attend. When cast retrospectives aired, he was absent. Even during the boom of nostalgia television, when nearly every major classic series reunited for specials, Carney never once appeared in a Honeymooners reunion. Joyce and other cast members were always willing, but his silence remained unbroken. And naturally, speculation grew. Some believed he had grown resentful of being typecast. Despite his Oscar win and acclaimed dramatic roles, many people still saw him first as Ed Norton. That label clung to him for years, and perhaps it felt more like a trap than a tribute. Others thought his retreat was tied to his ongoing struggles with anxiety, depression, and painful memories from a period in his life that may not have been as joyful as it appeared from the outside. There was no feud, no rift, no scandal, yet the lack of conflict seemed almost as revealing. Carney's total retreat left colleagues and fans wondering if he had been suffering in ways no one truly understood. For Joyce Randolph, who remained unfailingly gracious, that silence was both puzzling and permanent. Even in his final years, long after the world had moved on, Carney held tightly to that distance. The decisions he made near the end of his life only deepened the mystery. As the decades passed, the Honeymooners remained frozen in time, a black and white relic of a simpler era. But the people behind those iconic performances aged, the world changed, and the chance for reconnection slipped quietly out of reach. For Joyce Randolph, those passing years brought understanding, or at least acceptance. For Art Carney, they brought only more silence. Joyce spent her later life reflecting on her career with honesty and warmth. Though she left the spotlight long ago, she remained beloved by fans. She attended tributes, gave thoughtful interviews, and spoke with pride and nostalgia about her years as Trixie. She understood the show's cultural significance and kept its legacy alive whenever she was asked. Yet whenever Art Carney's name was mentioned, her answer never changed. She had not seen him. She had not heard from him. Not a single time. There had been no argument, no misunderstanding, just a silence she never fully understood. She recognized that he had been distant, even during filming, but after the show ended, he simply disappeared from her life. And from what she could gather, from everyone else's as well. She never expressed bitterness. In fact, she was consistently gracious when speaking about him. He was a genius, she once said, but very quiet. That was the closest she ever came to explaining it. She seemed to accept that whatever kept him away belonged solely to him, and that she would never know the full story. Meanwhile, Art Carney continued to age out of public view. After his Academy Award win, he chose only a handful of selective film roles and never truly returned to the mainstream. He declined invitations for interviews, tributes, and retrospectives. As his health declined, he remained almost entirely invisible to the fans who adored him and to the co-stars who had once stood beside him. When Art Carney passed away in 2003 at the age of 85, it marked the end of an era, but it also confirmed what many had long suspected. Whatever kept him away from his past, he carried it with him until the very end. There were no final interviews, no parting thoughts, no public reflections on the Honeymooners, Joyce Randolph, or the legacy he had helped shape, Joyce, who lived until 2024, outlived nearly all of her castmates. She remained a quiet ambassador for the show, a steady voice for the fans, and a symbol of its enduring charm. And though she never received the answers she may once have wondered about, she seemed at peace with that. Carney had made his choice, and she had made hers. Still, a question lingered. Was it really just distance? Or was something deeper at play, something private, painful, or personal, that even Joyce could not fully understand? Fans continued to wonder, and that mystery, unresolved and quietly haunting, only grew stronger as whispers and speculation over the years refused to fade. When two co-stars never speak again, people naturally start to imagine hidden stories. Rumors circled for decades about Joyce Randolph and Art Carney. Was there a falling out? A personal rift? Anything at all that explained the silence? But nothing ever surfaced. There was no feud, no argument, no dramatic confrontation. Just silence. And the silence wasn't limited to Joyce. Carney distanced himself from nearly everyone involved with the Honeymooners. He declined interviews, skipped reunions, and ignored tributes. Jackie Gleason and Audrey Meadows both noted his absence. It was as though he had deliberately erased that entire chapter of his life. Some believed he resented being typecast as Ed Norton. Even with an Oscar and a respected career, he was still viewed by many as the quirky, lovable sewer worker. That label may have felt like a shadow he couldn't escape. Others believed his disappearance was tied to deeper struggles, his battles with depression, trauma, alcoholism, and lifelong anxiety. For a man who already hated the spotlight, revisiting a past that may have carried painful memories was likely something he wanted to avoid entirely. And still, fans waited. They waited for a comment, a reunion, a moment of closure, but it never came. Joyce, to her credit, never fueled the rumors. She said the same thing every time. Art Carney was kind, brilliant, and very private. He never reached out to her again, but she never believed it was out of malice-only mystery. In a way, the silence became its own legacy. Not dramatic or scandalous, but deeply human. A quiet reminder that two performers could create something unforgettable together and walk away from it forever, each in their own direction. And when Joyce looked back on it, her final reflections offered something more meaningful than any explanation in the end. The story of Art Carney and Joyce Randolph wasn't about betrayal or bitterness. It was about two actors who portrayed a fictional marriage so convincingly that millions believed the closeness must have been real. But it never was. There was no final conversation, no reunion, no moment of reconciliation. The Bond fans imagined simply didn't exist off-screen. Joyce accepted that with grace. She never claimed there was bad blood. But when asked if she ever heard from Carney again, her answer never changed. No, not after the last episode. Not after his Oscar win. Not when The Honeymooners was honored decades later. Carney made his choice. He stepped away from the spotlight and never returned. No reflections, no statements, just silence. It wasn't a rejection of Joyce. It was the same pattern he followed with everyone. Joyce, meanwhile, carried the legacy forward. She gave interviews, attended events, and spoke warmly of her co-stars, even the ones she never saw again. She outlived the rest of the cast, becoming the final voice able to share what really happened. And what she shared was always simple. Art Carney was a genius, but he was also deeply private. Their story reminds us that on-screen chemistry doesn't always reflect real life. Sometimes silence isn't about conflict, it's about who someone chooses to be when the cameras stop rolling. Carney disappeared. Joyce remained, and the distance between them became its own quiet chapter in television history, filled with laughter on screen and unanswered questions just beyond it.